everybody, it's Mike for Sim Racing 604, and today we're going to be doing something a little different. I just got it in my mind to, as I was going through Formula One cars in Assetto Corsa and just thinking about them and how fast they are compared to other cars, and I just wanted to do a quick ranking of all the cars in Assetto Corsa, and it just one thing led to another, and I went deep down a rabbit hole of facts and statistics. So here is the presentation. So quick facts, some housekeeping before we start here. The data was collected through RSR live timing. For all cars and tracks available for PC and I believe PS4 as well. I know Xbox One is having some trouble with some DLC, but I've tried to include every available car and every available track. There are over 150 cars included in this survey. The fictional and legacy tracks were excluded, so I kept out Highlands, I kept out like the drift tracks, the drag tracks, I think there's a hill climb, that kind of thing. Historic Monza unfortunately did not make the cut. I wanted them to be modern tracks and have that comfort that they were laser scanned, so we ended up with 13. So if you're just here to find out what the fastest car and track were, totally get that. It's a commonly asked question on the internet. So the fastest car in the game is the Ferrari F138. Nobody should be surprised by that, actually. If you've driven it in Assetto Corsa, you know it's just an amazing car. And the fastest track in the game, also no surprise, Monza. Going back to 2004, I believe it was, Juan Pablo Montoya set the fastest F1 lap ever at Monza, and it was something like 258 kilometers per hour average, so insanely fast track. So how was the data collected? As I mentioned, it was all culled from RSR live timing, and the first thing I did was I took 4 cars, a sports car, a hypercar, a GT car, and an open wheel car, and used those as my points of reference. I knew that if I just took an open wheel car, obviously the high-speed cornering is way askew. Those things just handle like they're on rails at high speeds, whereas in a sports car, you're going to go right off the track. And conversely, if I just went with a sports car or just went with a hypercar, there might be too much acceleration. For example, the Shelby Cobra has unbelievable acceleration, but the turning is not that great. So I tried to take a decent cross sampling of the cars available in Assetto Corsa. The best times, I took the best times from each of these cars and use them to rank the tracks. For example, if at Monza the best sports car ran it in 2 minutes, the best hypercar in 1:45, GT 1:35, open wheel 1:25, something like that, then that would give me my average speed, and I was able to rank the 13 tracks that made the cut from fastest to slowest. Once I had them ranked, I took the one in the middle. In this case, it was Brands Hatch GP, and that was what I used for my test track to compare all of the cars. So again, RSR live timing, I took the best lap at Brands Hatch GP for each of those cars. And why did I do this? First and foremost, just noting about why I used Brands Hatch, I figured if I took a really fast track like Monza, something that had tremendous straight line speed but not much for cornering, could rank higher falsely, and something that had, if I chose a slow track, something that cornered well but didn't have great acceleration, could be skewed to kind of win this battle. And RSR was chosen because it's just got so much data. You can just pull from it. It would be nice if I had everything in a CSV or something like that, but I did do it manually, and it was just a great source of data for me to do this. What are the problems with this method? First and foremost, RSR live timing doesn't give times for average sim racers. It favors hot laps particularly by aliens. So that is an issue for somebody like myself, I consider myself kind of an average sim racer. I'm not setting many world records, if any. It really doesn't represent me very well, but again, RSR was just the most available source of data. Secondly, some car and track combos had too small of a sample group. So for example, a lot of the drift cars at Brands Hatch only had 1 or 2 times set. So that doesn't necessarily accurately represent what the car can do at Brands Hatch. It just represents what a couple people were able to do at that particular track in those particular cars. And finally, Brands Hatch, it could be imbalanced. It does have straightaways, it has some high-speed corners, some lower-speed corners, but any track you choose is going to slightly favor one car over another. But I just had to go with something kind of in between, so that's how Brands Hatch was chosen. All right, without further ado, the top 5 fastest cars in Assetto Corsa. Number 1, we already talked about this, the Ferrari F138, based on the 2013 Ferrari Formula One team. Number 2, surprisingly, if you're expecting the SF15T, so was I. The Lotus 98T, that killer F1 car from the mid 80s with something like 4 or 5 bar of turbo pressure when it's set to 100%. Comes up huge here, comes in at number 2, only behind the Ferrari F138. Number 3, we still have not got to the SF15T, surprisingly, but the Lotus Exos T125 Step 1 comes in at 3. Number 4, the Ferrari SF15T, finally there, 2015 spec. This one had KERS deployment of varying levels and just electronics to the gills, but only came in at number 4. And finally, the Lotus Exos T125 rounding out the top 5. So not giving up much to its slightly stronger brother there, the Step 1 at number 3. And how do these cars compare? Using the Ferrari 138 as a basis for comparison, the 98T came in about 4% slower, so not giving up much there. The Exos T125 Step 1 about 5% slower than the 138, so the 98T and the 125S1 very, very close in speed. SF15T doesn't seem that bad compared to the Exos, but consider that between 2013 and 2015, at least according to the physics in Assetto Corsa, there's an 8% drop in speed between those Formula cars. And number 5, the Exos 125, about 11% slower than the Ferrari 138. Ranking the fastest tracks, first and foremost, Monza should be no surprise. As I mentioned off the jump, that is where Juan Pablo Montoya set the all-time fastest lap for Formula One. Number 2, Nordschleife, that giant straight just before you bring it home really bumps up that average. Spa, there's Radion straight, just after, about 20 seconds into your lap, you get onto that long uphill straight, and then there's the winding straight at the tail end of the circuit as well to bring the average speed up. Red Bull Ring, no surprise there. I believe there's only 10 corners if I'm not mistaken, so lots of straight line speed on that one. And finally Imola, again, the home straight is just giant. I think it does a double right and then a left or something like that, just slight bends though, so you get a tremendous amount of speed going at Imola. And how do they compare to each other? Using Monza as the reference, Nordschleife about 4% slower, Spa 9% slower, so quite a jump there. Red Bull Ring about 11% slower than Monza, and finally at number 5, Imola 13% slower than Monza. So still very, very fast courses, but significantly a step down in overall lap speed from Monza. So I'm going to burn through these now. There's no need for me to narrate this. If you're looking for cars to race against, I would advise just pausing the video and just take down some notes of cars slightly ahead or slightly behind of your favorite car to drive, and it'd be a good basis to use to set up races for yourself. So I'm going to mute my microphone and give just a couple seconds per slide here. And finally, rounding out the top 159 here. Um, Should be no surprise to most of us, the Abarths there, bringing up the rear. Still fun cars to drive, but certainly not slow. The Toyota AE86 Drift there at 156, that I would like to see somebody actually push that a bit more. That was a good example of not enough data. There was only one time there, and it's I don't have the times listed, but it was significantly slower than the one ahead of it, so I think somebody could quite possibly break that record. And these three cars here, the E92 Drift Countach S1 and the Mark IV Drift Supra, had no times at Brands Hatch GP. So just a little note there, if you want to get some RSR fame, go ahead, run those cars at Brands Hatch, and you will instantly get a world record for however long it lasts. So I had no data. Obviously, the Lamborghini Countach S1 would have ranked somewhere in there. I'm thinking it's probably in the top 50, could be. But regardless, I did not have a time for it. So yeah, those are three that were not included, unfortunately, in this exercise. So ranking the tracks here finally, Monza we talked about, we already talked about the top five there, Mugello and Brands Hatch being the median track as we discussed before, and the slowest six tracks available in Assetto Corsa. Yeah, surprised to see Silverstone that low, but there we are. So that's going to do it. Thank you so much for watching. I can't say this was the most fun video I've made, but mostly satisfying my own curiosity and hopefully yours as well. Interesting probably to see where some of your favorite cars rank in the fastest. And if you disagree with anything I've done here, like I said, my method was not 100% solid, so if there's something I could do better, please let me know. And I might do another video in the future, but for now, this is what you're going to have to live with. And what else? That's it. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll talk to you in the next video.